Right, we have a few people still trying to hop in here. I'll go ahead and introduce myself. I am Jessica Thomas. I teach math at University High School in Morgantown. Um, this past year, I used Desmos every single day of my life in order to teach students in the remote/hybrid situation. And I've learned that it's a really great tool for student engagement, not just in a remote situation, but even in the classroom. So I'm going to show you how you can kind of use this program to help mainly in your math classroom is sort of the main goal. But if you're not a math person, you can still stay in here and you might find some things. So yes, Alex, it's fun to see a name that I know pop up, even though we'll say we've met a couple times, I guess. Um, so for my people who might just be hopping in, you can follow the instructions on the screen in order to access the slideshow. I will not be, going through slides on the open screen like a lot of the sort of digital presentations do. It'll be on the interactive slideshow, so you can follow the instructions on the screen or in the chat. There is a link sort of in the at the top that you can click on to get enrolled automatically. So I see 4 people have done that. So we'll wait a minute to see anybody else who's going to do that. So as a teacher, you can do what I've done and either tell people the code or give them the link. But you can also create a class. So if you have first period, whatever, you can create a class and then you can, whatever you want students to do, you can assign it to that class. If you wanted to do something that way, it's even a little bit faster that way because then everybody who's in the class gets the assignment. They don't have to be like in class to get the code. So that's kind of useful. Alright, so we've got 4 people in still. Anybody else need some help getting into our activity here? Don't really wanna take off without people. Okay. Um, so this program that we're logging into, there's 5 people, awesome, is called Desmos Activity Builder. If you might have used Desmos before as a graphing calculator, they also have this Activity Builder interactive slideshow, completely free. This session is not gonna be teaching you about, like, all the different little features. That's what I just did, at 1 o'clock. So if you want to sort of see some of that information, you can click the links at a later time. Um we're going to be mainly focusing on how do you use this tool sort of in a more advanced way to really promote the student engagement in a classroom, not just a remote situation, because I hope we don't ever really have to do that again, but how is it more engaging than like just paper pencil tasks? Um, First question, have you ever used a Desmos activity? Yes or no? And I have it coded in such a way that depending on what you choose, you get a different question to be answered. So if you say yes, I will ask you, how did it go? And if you say no, I will ask you, what is something that you might have trouble with keeping engagement? We all have topics that are pretty engaging for students, but then maybe not other things. So we see square roots and ratios. It kind of is the boring topics that are hard to be exciting for students. So we'll see if we can think of some things that you can do with those. You also see other people's responses come up, I think, after you type yours in, so you can see what other people are saying. Seems like this should be just about everybody in here. Okay. All right. I'm going to start by talking about 3 features of Desmos that can help with engagement across sort of any type of lesson that you might do. So the first one is going to be the pacing situation. So a minute ago, you could not click past slide 1. You should now be able to click on slide 2. Click over to slide 2. There, I see some people hopping along. And go in there. And if you watch on the open screen, you can see what I see as a teacher. And so right now as a teacher, I have 2 screens open, the first slide and the second slide. I think that this helps engagement because students know where they're supposed to be. You can even make it so that they're on one slide all the time, and if they don't even have to click to the next slide, it'll just push them there. Kinda like Nearpod. Nearpod keeps everybody on one screen. I like to keep it open from the beginning and then just add new things they can do, because then if someone starts late or maybe they need to go back and look at something, they can do that. So I usually just open up the next slide or the next couple of slides. But that's sort of a personal choice. Or if you notice that like a lot of people are kind of all over the place, you might like say, okay, I'm going to put everybody on slide 10, and that's going to help your engagement because they know where they're supposed to be. They also kinda know, like, "Oh, I gotta get this one done because she's gonna either push me forward or open the next one, I'm gonna get too far behind if I don't kinda keep up what I'm supposed to be doing." That's one thing. The next thing you can do is the lesson feedback option on Desmos. So whenever it lets you, it should let you go over to slide 3 now. When you are running a Desmos activity, you can leave instant feedback, which is for encouragement, praise, give them hints, whatever. They can't reply at this time. Hopefully that'll be an update. Desmos is like always adding sort of new features and things, so maybe sometime. You can leave feedback at any point during a lesson that you're teaching or even later, right? If it's something that you have students going to do for like homework, you could go back in during your plan or whatever and like leave comments, and then during class be like, okay, open up your activity. Let's look at what I told you. So we're going to try it out so you can see how it works. Tell me your favorite joke in the box and I'll comment on it. Watch for the little red bubble at the top of the screen so that you see your comment come in. You can also see an example of feedback I've left for a student. I don't know why it's so like pixelated, but you can kind of get an idea of how it shows up. It does show up as like what time you sent it. It'll also show up if a student hasn't looked at it, it will show that. So it's kind of a nice thing. Barbara can't think of any jokes. Let's hear some jokes or anything else you want to. There, Alex got me a math joke in there. So I'm going to click on his comment. And one thing you might also notice, or maybe not because you're not sort of in the teacher zone, but there's the share with class button. But even if you don't click it, I can still see it. So that's really great. So some student who might be really bad about like clicking submit, you can still see their work. This share with class means that other students won't see it. That's all. So I'm going to reply to Alex there. So Alex, you should be able to see a little red button at the top that you can click on and open up what I've said. And okay, let me see. I got one more person to send something to, Carrie. Awesome. So another thing is on the teacher page, and you can see it on the Hopin page. Lost mine. That on the screen, I can see all 5 of you guys. I can see that 4 people have responded. Carrie hasn't typed her joke in yet. And I don't know how well you can see on yours, but there's like little triangles in the corners that let me know that I've commented on everybody's. And then the last sort of major Desmos tool that can help with engagement is the calculator feature. So whenever it lets you, you can go forward on to the next one. And most of, if you're a math teacher, you probably have used Desmos as the graphing tool, or maybe just the calculator tool, but you can embed or enable the calculator within a Desmos lesson. And this puts it at the top of the screen. And the reason that it's not automatically enabled is because there's probably sometimes when you don't want a student to have a calculator that easily accessible. Now, if they're already on their computer, they can just open another tab and do it. But I think having the calculator enabled helps with student engagement because they're not trying to find a calculator someplace else, whether that's their phone or another tab, or they also like feel like, okay, this is easily accessible for me, instead of thinking, well, I don't really feel like doing that calculation, it's too hard. They know that it's like right there for them. But if you want to calculate, you do have to put it in, and the instructions are there about how you can do it, and you have to do it before you start the lesson with students. Something else I really like is that anything a student types and doesn't delete, you can see. So I love that for like assessments this year, because if they left it in there and they got something wrong, I could go in and be like, oh, they typed a 2 instead of a 3 when they were doing this step, and that's why it messed them up, which is something that you can't really see with like a handheld calculator on their desk in the classroom. So if you want to, give it a try of clicking on the calculator at the top and type in whatever you want, and you'll see it has all the basic features that you would need. So I see Vanessa has tried some things out here, and I can see that she's done 15 times 3. and know exactly what she's typed in. So those are your 3 main features that Desmos has that you can kind of do with any lesson that you wanted to do, math-wise or really any other subject-wise. Um, However, Desmos has tons of pre-made activities of all types for all levels. I don't really know if there's anything all the way down to, like, kindergarten, but there's definitely middle school, high school, and some upper elementary activities in there. Um, we're gonna do several so you can kinda see the variety of things that could be accomplished. You can find any activity you want by either searching the Desmos site, which doesn't give you everything, it just gives you basically things that the Desmos company has created. If you wanna see things that other teachers have made, which is way more, you can just Google whatever topic you're interested in and then Desmos Activity Builder, and you will get probably a bunch of stuff, and you can look at and be like, "Okay, this is really cool what this person has done." For instance, that's how I found the one that you're gonna do now. It's not gonna be super exciting because there's only 5 of us. It's better when it's like a whole group, but we'll see how it goes. So whenever it lets you, you can go forward to the next one. So, question, how many pets do you currently have? Type just the number in the box, and then if you want to, you can tell us more about your pets. This is an exact activity I did with my freshmen this year in December whenever we were all learning from home. And it's going to be a statistics type activity. So, we're starting with this numerical fact about people in our class. And so it's not going to be super interesting because we only have 5 people. Obviously, when you have 25 students, you get a lot of numbers to play with. You also get the students who live on a farm and have got chicken and cows and they put in 25 pets because they count those as their pets. So we've got some lots of pets in here. After you've told me about your pets, you can tell me what you think the results are going to be for our small class of 5. Tell me something about what do you think? We've got 5 people in here. What do you think you might be able to know about their pets before you see their numbers? You'll notice that this text box already started you out with, I think, the typical student. That's a thing you can do with a little easily in sort of the coding layer of Desmos, which I still also think helps with engagement because they don't have to type that part. They can get right to what they actually want to say, and they don't have to spend their time trying to type it. It also kind of shows them how to structure a response from the beginning, because if you don't have that and they kind of go every which way, but starting out the sentence can be helpful and also save a little bit of time. We've got some typical guesses in here about what we think. And then you'll get to sort of see your results. So whenever you made your sort of predictions, now you can see your results. And you can kind of see how this would be engaging for students because they get to put theirs in. They get to think about, okay, what do I think I know about everybody else in our class? And now I'm going to get to see it. Now, our data is not too interesting because we only have 5 people with some small numbers. But again, normally you get some people, last time we had someone say, Alex's friend Janalee that he mentioned said that she has 3.5 pets because she shares a pet with like a neighbor's house. So we have people that like wonder about that. People wonder, what are the pets? We also have people who, whenever have the students that live on a farm and list that they have 25 pets, people say, "How does someone have 25 pets?" And we say, "Well, they got 20 chickens and then a couple of dogs or whatever." Most popular pets is another thing that is good to wonder. Um, Having these text boxes for students lets them everybody be able to say something they want to say. If you were running this activity in a class without the sort of digital way for students to submit their thoughts, you're going to just have a couple of kids raise their hands or shout out things they notice and wonder. Having this digital space gives every single student the chance to type something in if they want to. I guess they don't have to, but if they want to, everybody has something to say. And we got some interesting noticings coming up. Braylon says the numbers are not in numerical order. Never had someone say that in this before, and I've done this activity like 6 times. So, it really lets you see what students are really thinking about. Then you wouldn't have probably got that maybe in sort of a larger group discussion if you didn't have this digital space. Whenever you're finished with your wonderings and your noticings, you can come to the next page. And again, this digital space for them to type in answers really lets you get the responses of everybody, which is keeping all students engaged, not just the ones who feel like raising their hands. Right, putting their responses in order, label what the data represents. Some people have said, let's do some calculations about the average. And we have one person saying that they want to put it in a graph. So we're going to actually do all of those things automatically on the Desmos program. I didn't make this activity again. Someone else figured out how to code this activity in such a way that it did this sort of layers that you're going to see. But whenever you're ready, you can come to the next one. And again, this was the first activity that I did when starting my sort of statistics unit with freshmen who should already be able to calculate these things, but might need a reminder before we start doing more difficult things like standard deviation or something like that. So this one, it automatically calculates our mean, median, and mode. Of course, not super interesting, again, because only 5 of us, but when there is more. It was also interesting because every class was something different whenever I did it, so it's more exciting for me too. And the students know that these are their numbers from their class, so it automatically adds that engagement to it. The way that this question is posed also helps with the engagement because it says, how much do you remember about these? And so it's a little bit not as much pressure. Students feel okay typing, I don't remember how to find mean, but I remember that median's the middle. They can put those in there. They don't feel quite so much pressure to be able to answer about all of them. They also weren't told, they were just given it. They weren't told, okay, I need you to calculate it right now. They said, here's what it is. What do you remember? This is also useful for being able to see where students are with certain things like the median. I see Barbara says the median is finding the middle. Vanessa says put them in order and then find the middle number, and noticing some of those differences. Now, maybe Barbara knows that and she just didn't type that in there, but maybe she doesn't. So being able to sort of see what each individual student is thinking about these can be helpful. Right, whenever you're ready. So if you don't always have to answer every single question, because again, we all probably know these because this is supposed to be for students, but just kind of letting you see how these work. But whenever you're ready, you can go to the next one, and it's going to create a very small dot plot of our data for you. Not super interesting, but you can still see it. So we have our not interesting dot plot, and it also shows you that yours is in green, so it's kind of interesting. That's also why you had to type just a number. If you'd typed, like, 3 pets in that very first box, it wouldn't work on this dot plot, so you have to have just a number, and it's asking you, what do the dots mean and what does the number mean? And you'd be surprised how many of my freshmen who did not understand what these, like, meant, not realizing that each dot represents one person and their response, and that all of the dots means that there are, in our case, 5 people here. So this was a very interesting question, sort of see where they were already standing at with not understanding what dot plots meant in the first place. And the total number of people who participated in our survey, so a very small amount. I'm going to open up a few slides for you to work through on your own about the rest of this activity. And this is kind of how I would do it in my class too. Sometimes I would say, okay, we're going to stick together. And other times you want to open up a couple more so that students who do work faster are able to, and they're not feeling bored. Because as we all know, you have to balance that about keeping everybody together versus letting those who are ready go forward to do that. So now that you know the numbers, you've been given the numbers, you've been put in the graph, you've also been given mean, median, and mode, and you could click back and look at those. Um, what could you say about typical students? And then it's going to ask you about mean, median, and mode, and which one is the best in our situation for the 5 people we have. So I'll let you kind of work through those at your own speed. And so you can see how these layers, adding more to these graphs as we go, is helpful. So far, everybody that has answered it has said that the mean seems to be doing a good job, but I often have students who don't want to choose the mean as a good representation because they say, well, how could you have 1.8 pets? And they don't want to use sort of a non-whole number for something like that. And then you can have that conversation is, okay, can we say that? Is it okay if a mean is not a whole number in a situation like this? Um, but most of you are saying that our mean seems pretty good. Usually you do end up with, when you have a large group of students for a question like pets, you do end up with something that is skewed because you have a few people with like a bunch of pets and a lot of people with just 0, 1, or 2. So it's just kind of skewed if you can't think about it. Um, and then we're kind of split so far on the median, if that's a good one, and what we think. Go forward at your own and put your thoughts in if you want to. We're all pretty split here because it's an interesting data set anyways. We got some people thinking the mode's the best, other people means and medians, and then this sort of lets you have that discussion. I mean, these are sort of mostly opinion questions. Now, not always. Sometimes we get the mode being way smaller than maybe what the average is, and you have those discussions. Um, Desmos has a lot of these sort of statistics activities already made where students put in their own information. It might be about pets, it might be about number of letters in their names, whatever, and it automatically creates the graphs, whether it's a dot plot, a histogram, even scatter plots, it can automatically create those things. You might be able to find one already made, or you might be able to mess with the program enough to be able to create it yourself. But doing the statistics and this engaging way of using actual student data can be really helpful. That's the end of our statistics example. We're going to do a graphing type example now about how we can keep some engagement with graphs. And Desmos was sort of first started with as a graphing tool. And so I use it the most for that, about teaching kids how to manipulate graphs and write equations and things. And so this next portion is just going to be some activities I've done with my freshman class, again with exponentials. So first picture is we've got some 3 exponential graphs, one thing that's the same and one thing that's different. Again, this digital space gives everybody a chance to say something, and it's sort of a low key about just some random thing that you notice is the same and different. So we'll take a second to let people have something to say about theirs. We're talking about y-intercepts and rate of change. They're all positive growth. Good. What else people have to say? You'll notice in your text box, you're able to type math type if you would need to for a certain question, and also upload a picture if you would need to for any type of question. So it's cool stuff. I think all of mine so far have been shared with class responses, but you can also make it to where it's not shared with the class if you need a more private type of answer for whatever type of engagement you're doing. All right. Now that you've thought about those graphs, on slide 18, you get to make a prediction. You've seen what 2 to the x, 3 to the x, and 4 to the x look like. Think about 5 to the x and try to think about yourself as a student. Try not to just plot the points, is what some people like to do, and they like to get it exactly right. Try to think about yourself as a student who is just learning about these types of graphs. Where do you think that 5 to the x would be on your graph? And it is hard to make a nice, pretty line. You do the best you can. Vanessa's a little wiggly, but that's okay because you can't do it perfect. Feel free to mess with some of the sketch features that are there. You can change the color and the thickness of the line if you want to. You can notice the sketching also lets you do text and math type if you would need to do that for whatever you're working on. Let Barbara put hers back up there. And if you watch on the open screen where you can see what I see, yeah, it's very hard to do. We had touchscreen teacher Chromebooks, and so I was always fine with drawing those with my students. You just say get the basic thing down. But if you look on your open screen, you can see what I see. I see the second that students are drawing something, I see it. So I can make a correction if I was wanting to. I wouldn't really do it on a prediction type thing, but if they were drawing something else, I could instantly, leave a comment on their slide and correct them. What I can also do is I can click this overlay screen and I can put everybody's on the same one. So if I didn't want everybody to sort of see the individual responses for whatever reason, I could do this overlay. We only have 2 in there right now. Barbara's been redrawing hers. And so you can kind of see that people have this general idea that they think it's going to go up like this. We've got people choosing some sort of different x-intercepts and even different sort of asymptotes here, but everybody's steepness seems to be about the same. And again, when you have a class of 20 or 25, 30 kids and everybody's graphs are going on there, you usually get a really dark portion where most people are making their prediction. And so they can kind of see engagement wise, like, oh, I'm really close to what everybody else is saying, or I don't, they can't tell which one is theirs unless they use a color no one else has. Like Barbara's used red, so we know that that one's hers. But you don't, wouldn't have to do that. After they make their prediction, you can let them test it out. So on slide 19, you'll get to use the slider to test it out. And I use this type of tool all the time. for any types of graphs, whether it's, linear functions, quadratics, exponentials, because you can create these graphing slides with the sliders and let kids manipulate graphs very quickly instead of having to plot everything by hand. Plotting everything by hand obviously takes a good deal of time, but as you adjust it, you'll see the same thing that some people have commented, like, oh, I can stay, and my y-intercept should stay the same, and I get steeper as I go, is interesting to watch, and you can see what all students are doing and even put an overlay on if you wanted to do that, if you were whatever you needed. The last thing that I wanted to show you, so we did sort of the statistics and how you can make statistics engaging and all of that, and then some graphings. The last thing I want to do is Desmos has a lot of pre-made kind of like games and challenges that have been really engaging for students. So I've chosen a level that's like a middle school type level, so hopefully we all feel comfortable with that. I'm actually going to open up all of them because they're like these challenges that you kind of want to move through at your own pace. So this is what I would do with this activity if I did it. This activity is to start talking about like inequalities on a number line and what that means, and kind of even builds into compound inequalities. Take a couple minutes to kind of move through at your own speed with these ones. Think about yourself as a student, how this might be engaging to you compared to a paper pencil activity. Once you think you've figured out how the scoring system works, you can go forward and start kind of trying to play the game to maximize your score there. I still have the teacher version of this page shared, and so you can see it if you want to. If you look at the open page, I can see so far that Vanessa has gotten the highest score on that first one because it goes and shows a check mark. Now, the X for Alex doesn't mean that he is wrong. It just means maybe he's not gotten the highest that he could maybe get. And I can also see how people are progressing through. So remote situation, this is what I watched and would help out as they seem to be lagging behind. But even in an in-person classroom setting, you could have this pulled up and you're already walking around talking to students, but you still might not notice that someone's not moving on along. And so you can see this screen that looks like we have a couple people who maybe have left our session, which is fine. But I can see that they're not on here anymore because Braylon doesn't have a little blue bubble anymore. But I can see the others moving on along or getting stuck, and then I can click on here and send them a message and try to help them out with whatever they might seem to be stuck on. As you've seen, I have several different things spliced together, and you can do that, right? This is, using inequalities on a number line and collecting points. There's another activity that's like collecting points on a coordinate plane and using inequalities in that way. And if you wanted to put those on the same lesson, maybe you're doing like a big review or something like that, you can do that. I know Barbara said she's used a Desmos lesson before and just one that's already made. And if you don't like pieces of it or you want to put more pieces in, you really can. It's super easy. And in the very beginning, there was a slideshow that like said, here's how you just do your basics. There's a video in there that shows you how you can splice them together, or I'll be happy to show you individually. If you just email me after this, sometime we can set up a time I can show you how to splice things together if you don't want certain parts or want to be able to put multiple ones together. Because before I knew that, I would be like, "Okay, we're gonna do this activity with these 10 slides. Okay, we're done. Now we gotta start this one with these 5 slides." Putting them all together saves a lot of time. Kids aren't jumping around from place to place. They know where they're supposed to be. And you can also keep in mind that if you need them to do something else, like if you wanted something on GeoGebra, for example, or any other like digital simulations, you could put a link on the slide to it and they could click on it, go and play that game or do that simulation, and then come back to the Desmos slides and tell you what they learned. So even if there's things that isn't available in Desmos, but you have it someplace else, you could have them go watch that video or whatever and do that. See, a couple of you say if you don't feel like doing some of the challenges, you can't get them, feel free to move forward. You're not getting, graded on it or anything. The end of this activity has what's called a class challenge, and these are ones that you can't make yourself yet. You have to already just have one that Desmos has made, but it's very similar. Like this one is the same red and blue dots, but students build their own. They put the red and blue dots wherever they want, and then they let other students play them. And so there's a bunch of these and all kinds of different activities and topics. And I found that to be something interesting. Not always that the whole class gets to do it, but as you're doing something like these challenges for the students who zip on through them, at the end they can make their own and then play others of kids who zipped on through. It gives you time to go back and help the students do sort of the basic ones at first. And it lets the kids have some creativity. So I see people are trying to build their challenge. So we'll give people a second to make theirs, and then we'll see if we can play somebody's. Um, Again, there's not any way to make your own of this like class challenge feature, but anytime that Desmos has a challenges activity, so they have some that are like, like balancing equations, things like that. There's usually like a challenge at the end where they can make their own. It looks like Barbara has finished hers, and so then if anybody wants to play hers, they can. I think I did mine with sometimes they have 2 truths and a lie, so students can make their own, like, box and whisker plot and then type in 3 statements, and one of them's supposed to be a lie. That's another one, so it's not always making one like this. Um, but having those is another interesting way for engagement that has basically 0 work on your part. It's already made on Desmos, you just tell the students to do it. You don't have to make up any of it. Alright, bye, Barbara, thanks for coming. So we only have a few minutes left anyways. If you wanna chat more, Barbara, just send me an email and we can talk about it. Alright, so we're down to just a few people left because we've lost some people along the way. So we just got a few. So we'll kind of zip through the end of this with our last 10 minutes. The next thing I did have, and we're not going to actually do it because there's not enough people to do it. And some of you guys were already in my session at 1 o'clock. But Desmos also has a Guess Who style game where students practice vocabulary related to graphs or any other topic that has pictures. Students pick a picture, and then the other student would ask yes or no questions to figure out what picture was was chosen. We were gonna play one, but again, we only have a few people participating right now, so it's kind of hard to do that, and we're running out of time. But it's a pretty cool thing to use. I use it in my classroom when we're starting a new unit. I'll put a bunch of the graphs up, let them talk to each other about those graphs and whatever words they choose. Then we learn the actual vocabulary, like this is a vertex, this is x-intercepts, or whatever, and then play again and say, please use your vocabulary. It's really easy to make your own on whatever topic you would want. We're just not going to do it right now because we're running out of time. So if I could have everybody who's still with me, go to slide number 31, and tell me a little bit about what you think has been sort of the most engaging thing that you've been able to do with me. It's only been a few things here. And then I'm going to show you about how do you find other stuff that might be more relevant to what you do, because some of this was lower level depending on where we're all at. Alex says that he thinks the games, and there are so many of them. Vanessa says you feel like that game or challenge would confuse your students a little bit, and I think that I've never really done that with my students. I had someone a couple weeks ago tell me they did it with some of their students, and they really got into it once they kind of learned how it worked. But there's plenty of other sort of pre-made games and challenges in there, but it is a good idea to play it yourself first, to make sure you really understand sort of the ins and outs of it, and what type of hints to give students and where they're going to get stuck at. Um, and liking the parts where their sentences were started for them is very, very good thing to do. Also, again, having that digital space for everybody to respond. They had to respond to something. Especially, I had so many teachers tell me, like, I can't get kids to participate in all my remote learning. Well, all mine were participating because they all had a space that was basically private for them. They didn't have to type like in the chat all the time. They just put it on these slides. Again, hopefully, you don't have to ever do that again. And there's plenty of graph and statistics activities already made, and that's what we're going to go into, how to find those now. So we have, chances are someone's already made what you want, right? Eva said, I did every single lesson this year on Desmos. Now, sometimes it would say, okay, we're going to leave Desmos and go to GeoGebra, but it was always in the same place so students knew where to find it, like on their Desmos dashboard. And I never hardly had to make anything myself. Sometimes I would find something and be like, I don't really like that, and then I'd make my own. Mostly there was something out there that I could use to at least get myself started, like how am I going to teach this digitally? And of course, you're not going to have to really do that this year. But sometimes if you're like, man, I've always taught, people mentioned square roots and ratios at the beginning. I've always taught those in the classroom, never very exciting. Try it. Try to see if you can find something out there that might be a different way than you've taught it before that might be more engaging. Um, However, again, don't search the Desmos site because it doesn't turn up everything that exists. What you want to do is just do a Google search for ratios, Desmos Activity Builder, and there's going to be a bunch of stuff. If you don't feel like searching for something right now, you can also click the link and there's a big collection of someone who's made a bunch of retro like games, um, that practice all kinds of stuff already made. If you want to go ahead and save anything you find, like, man, I really want to use that, there's a little plus sign you can save if you're on your Desmos account. You can tell us about any account that you have, any game activity that you found if you want to. Um, and, then I'm gonna open up the rest of the little bit for the last 5 minutes because 'cause you'll just gonna be exploring on your own right now. If you wanna make your own, I do have the links there to watch the slideshow or video on how to do that, and also how to splice different activities together. Like I said, if you like a couple slides from this person's and a couple slides from this person, you can put those slides into your own, and with just 2 clicks of a button, so it tells you how to do that. Um And there's also a little note about how to make activities self-checking, which is not easy to do until you learn how to do it. You have to do some coding, which was kind of beyond what we're doing. But if you're interested in something like that, I'll be more than happy to help you with it. And it shows you an example of what that is on slide 35. If you're interested in that, a lot of my students told me that that was what was really helpful for them, is being able to know that they had it right before they moved on. They got like a thumbs up or a smiley face or whatever. So I'll let you have some chance to explore a little bit. Um, and, um, I like those. So Robin likes those response starters. Open-ended questions, very helpful with those. And Lisa, you'd be surprised the really interesting answers that would come out sometimes when you'd be like, describe this graph. When you get 30 different responses about one graph, you get some really interesting stuff. Things that you might have never thought of, or things you might have never heard if it had just been an in-person discussion, where some of those kids that are super quiet actually have some really interesting things in their brain, and giving them that digital space to write something down comes out with some really interesting stuff. And we have about 3 minutes left. As you spend some time exploring anything, looking at things, feel free to say goodbye whenever you're ready. If you ever need anything, want me to help you with a more individualized session with you, you can email me and we can set something up, and I'll be happy to kind of talk with you about what might be useful for your particular classroom setting. I hope you gained something that is useful to you here. And if you ever need the links to any of the slideshows or videos again, you can just send me an email and I'll send those back to you. You can also go to student.desmos.com, and as long as you signed in before you started this activity, it should still be saved on there for you and you can revisit it at any time, which is also really great for student engagement, because they knew that, oh, if I have a doctor's appointment, I can get back in. Or if I'm having a bad day, I can get back in and do it tomorrow and read back over it tomorrow, watch the videos again or whatever. So lots of great things that you can use it for. Thanks, Alex.